We're going to call the meeting to order. This is the Policy Review Committee meeting, March 27th, 2017, at 6 p.m. And we will start with our national anthem. Pledge
Are you singing?
Are you singing? Awesome.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I have agendas over here in the corner, printed agendas, if anybody wants one. Do you have one? Jim, you need one?
Got it on here.
Anybody else want a printed one? Would you like a printed one? No shame in having a printed agenda. We have them. All right. So, we'll start with the old business. Trying to get through these 113s. I think we're finally in a good spot. So, 113, the policy 113, basically .0. We had a debate about whether or not it was formatted and intended the way Mr. Warner had wanted, and he was good with it. I conferred with Shelley and Mr. Hurley offline, and they were both feeling good about it. So unless anybody has any concerns, we're going to move this on to the first reading. So 113.1, we already had the first reading on this one, and we, unless any there was no debate at the board meeting. This is the, we had basically adopted the follow-up. Yeah, there was a.
Students with disability?
Yeah, there's 5 sections of the special education. This one's specific to discipline.
Great.
So this is the one I believe we leveraged Tom Warner's.
That was Mr. Warner's recommendation.
Yeah, was to use the one we had. He was comfortable with the one that PASBA had given us. Any objections to go into second reading?
I'm okay with that.
All right. So 113.2 was the one where PASBA had come back to us and said, we had gotten Mr. Warner's recommendation. PASBA had said, hey, you're missing a piece around behavioral support. So then we went back, and Mr. Hurley went back and also confirmed that basically PASBA is often a little behind, and he would prefer to defer to Mr. Warner because he's up on all the latest, and he basically reviewed it and said, no, we're good as is. Like he's fine with it. And
Might have been a step back to adopt their policy,
right.
sort of.
So I think he's also, as a general theme from Mr. Warner, he is basically kind of saying, hey, a lot of this stuff's already in state law, and we don't need to necessarily restate that in our policies. So as long as our policies are within the guidelines of what state law is, then we're good. And so he's saying, we don't need to call that out specifically. We're good. Connor, do you have a comment?
No, I was just testing it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm going to use a microphone in the policy.
Well, I didn't think you were, but who knows? You want to be official. All right, so we're gonna move this one to first reading. All right. 113.3. So, oh, okay. This one's actually, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Hurley, this one's already been. We've already said okay. Okay. So this one, we've already agreed to move it to first review. I guess we didn't have an okay because we were following up. Yeah, I'm not sure why this didn't make the. I don't know why this didn't make the first reading last time, because we had in our last meeting we had said that we were moving this one to the board.
I don't see.
So I'm not sure.
Update before removal. In what way? Oh, because they're waiting for that. We're waiting for PASBA to finalize that one?
No, we had said that we were moving this one to first reading, but it didn't get on the agenda. So I don't know if it just missed the agenda. But this was the only one that I think we were saying was clean. We didn't have any questions on. This is the 113.4 is the one that we had a lot of questions on.
Now, I didn't get meeting documents tonight. Where should I, the last meeting? I didn't get meeting documents for policy tonight.
There was an email that went out at 11:20 with the old business.
Okay.
You know,
I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, would you prefer that she send the documents out to us by email each week?
Well, I don't care. I just got used to them out on the drive.
That's fine.
So I was looking for them
Well,
on the drive.
I guess I prefer email, but I can
Yeah,
do
email's
drive.
We can do both. I just need to let her know.
When I asked her to email, she just said, give her a advance warning.
She's basically-
Tell her on a
yeah.
Friday or a Thursday afternoon.
Well, she can send it out with the agenda,
That would.
and
I
then
don't
Years ago,
really.
that's what we used
Yeah, that's
everything
fine.
to be on.
she's fine with that. I think she was just wanting to avoid not printing everything because the email would have all the supporting docs and all that
Yeah.
if you wanted to see them, which gets really lengthy.
I don't care. If it's drive, it's fine. If it's email.
All right, so I'll just let her know that if we could just, when she puts them out on the shared drive, when she
Let
sends
us
the
know. How
agenda
about
to
that?
send it,
Yeah.
or or let you know.
I can
All right.
write it down.
The 113.4. So this one is going to the first reading as is, and we're not using Tom Werner's recommendation, and he basically, because Mr. Hurley, you correct me if I'm wrong, he basically said that he didn't mean to send that he, right, is that the one?
It was my understanding from Paul, that it was he basically said template, there was a whole bunch of different documents going.
He had a template that he was reusing, and he reused it and didn't.
Okay, yeah, that happens with this stuff like
My
that.
understanding, that he
Yeah.
just was sending a lot of stuff to us, and that just got caught.
So which one is that you're
So
saying?
113.4,
Or he likes
as
it?
presented by PASBA, he was
Okay.
comfortable with it.
Okay, good, all right. Confidentiality of special ed student info, good, all right.
All right. So 116 went to first reading, and we're scheduled for second reading. And this was a brand new policy as submitted by PASBA. So the whole thing was it's pretty brief. It just talks about. Did anyone get a chance to read this or look at it? It just talks about the tutors and being excused from school.
I remember the discussion on that, probably this time last year. We were splitting hairs on
I mean, is
that.
this? Is this common? Do you get much of this, Jim?
Request for tutors?
Well, do you get requests for kids to miss school for tutors? Like, do they,
No. I can't remember.
that's what I'm like, that seems odd that we
Yeah, I've been doing
need
it
a
for
policy
10
on
or
this.
11. Don't remember any.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, it
Skip
surprises
school to
me
go
that-
do
Honestly,
something.
like once in 15 years, I think we have that.
Really?
Yeah, one time I can remember something.
Usually it's after school.
Yeah, it's usually
It's an
after.
after-school program or a weekend program or a summer program. And not
I just
during
don't know how we have any jurisdiction over a private tutor either. Like, it's sort of,
This is just saying if a parent,
the only thing it really requires is that they let it says they're supposed to let us know that they're using a private tutor,
Yeah,
which I don't see why they would have to.
unless like just that maybe you could aid in some.
Like our
consideration.
I don't, is that, unless that's a law, I can't
yeah.
imagine
It's a
it
brand new
is.
policy, it's not even mapped to anything.
No, it's brand
One
new.
new that they're recommending, so I can only assume that it's something.
What page is
I
it in
don't
the
know.
packet? Is this a new business packet or the old business?
This is the old
Old
business.
business.
It's 116. I mean, we already sent it to first reading. I just, I mean,
It's just,
but I mean, this is one of those ones where, like,
never
it just
cleaned
seems
up.
like we don't need it, but they're saying we do, and we don't get any, we haven't had any,
Issue.
because I mean, last time we met, we had a couple of principals were here, and they were saying they don't get any of these.
Is there, Jim, can you give a reason why that schools would want this policy?
All I can think of, would it count, Rob, tell me if I'm wrong, missing a school day if someone left for tutoring? So this would count as not missing a school day?
That's the only reason why
Yeah.
that could happen.
that's what it
Because
is.
You don't- it doesn't go
it's sort of
against you.
listed as the tutoring is a supplemental education to current programming.
So you wouldn't technically miss that.
So in
You're
other
not
words, the
absent.
school is saying, we're going to let you miss so you can go to this special tutor, but
Doesn't count.
because that's replacing our programming, you have to let us know who it is and they have to be certified and all that. It's not like a private tutor that I'm just going to hire on my own. This is like, I mean,
Yeah, it wouldn't
they're
count.
hiring them, but I'm saying you're using it as a supplement to the current
Yeah.
program.
Basically, Mr. Harris has to approve.
And you-
Yeah. Like one day a week,
Good.
I want my kid to get tutored in some language that we don't offer, and we allow it. They can miss,
Yeah.
2 periods of school twice a week or whatever. Then we have to ensure that they're certified and all that.
So it becomes an excused absence.
Yes.
I get it. That makes two.
Like, yeah, I guess technically it's like they're not absent.
Right.
We're allowing them
Doesn't
to
count
leverage other programming that we don't offer.
That would be agreed with.
I mean, this must be an issue for different school districts. All right, 204 was attendance. And this was the one that was updated, and I'm not sure. We got this one, we didn't get this one on the agenda in time for the full board for first reading. But this was an existing policy that had some amendments by PASBA. So this just updates the standard, like how many classes they have to, or how many years, days of class they have to attend, how many absences are okay. And most of the stuff that they add is like taking care of like homeschooling and or like cyber schooling, like some of those, the nuances that are, didn't exist years ago. And it also talked about educational trips that can be excused and count as not missing a day.
I'm still looking for the policy.
be anything from a religious holiday to 4-H, FFA,
Yep.
medical, appointments of any kind. Obviously, it's urgent.
I mean, this also touches on the tutoring,
About attending it.
about receiving tutoring in a specialized field that the school district doesn't offer. It's not considered an absence. And then there's a passage in there that says that we have to announce the policy officially each year in like the student handbook. But basically, we have to make everyone aware every year of what the policy is. That was one of the major ads.
Where are these policies?
This is the 204. This is the 200s.
It's in the old business folder.
It should be in the old business
So it
folder.
is in the drive, 'cause I couldn't
they're on the
find
drive
it.
too now,
I
yeah.
couldn't find it on the drive.
Yeah, they're there now. I don't know if they just got posted.
Maybe did your link not refresh maybe?
Is there a link? I
Connor,
logged
scroll
into,
down and Google, you have your regular link, there should be a share folder on the left-hand side, it says share with others.
I have team drives and my drives, and I share it with me.
We need to have a little class.
On drives.
We need Matt to come in here and do
Why would
it.
it sign in?
Okay, got it, thank you.
I have trouble every time.
It's not that one, is it?
I mean, I know I'm not like Mr. Tech, but like
I get it on the school side, but I can't get on the drive side.
I think it's just the path changes or something. Like it seems like I can't. If I have it up one day and then try to like just keep that page up and then just click on it, like normally in most links, it will just have you log in and then take you back there. It won't do
I
that.
figured out, so if you're looking at it and you finally navigate to the thing, you can click, you can right click.
Can you save it as a favorite?
Yeah, that's what I just did. I right clicked on policy review committee and I clicked add to my drive. So now whenever I log in, it'll be in my drive.
All
So I
right.
figured it out now, but thank you.
I need a class.
Get one of the computer teachers in here.
Yeah, that or just a fourth grade student.
I was there, yeah.
I don't have any of these other policies that she lists here. Anybody have any concerns?
These guidelines fall into if you have school in the summer, they're going to take additional courses. Under these guidelines, they come to you, Mr. Harris. So there was speaking about a year ago from a Boy Scout group, who wanted to take some additional math classes which fall out. A gray area.
Yeah, we had a student last year who, I wish it was my daughter, taught herself like 3 different languages over the summer. It all depends on what they want to do with that. If they want to, say, skip a level they would test a certain level, but they wouldn't receive credit for it. So it would all depend. Now, if they can do an independent study along with the teacher, then they could possibly receive credit for
They
it.
think it takes up the same route. And if they could pass that course, would that carry on?
Not unless we had a dual enrollment
Right.
with it. That would create the reasons by getting, taking a class from an outside source. That would be
But
great.
you took the two math classes and brought up to the more on track at an accelerated level.
Well, if you worked with a teacher over the summer, it's like an independent study, then they could get credit for it. However, they just could take the book, like this girl, they took the book and taught herself.
Yeah, that's right.
I was like, wow. And we had that with, in math a couple of times, we have that where a student wants to go to calculus. Well, I don't want to test out
Now I
on
do have an
it.
idea.
They get a B or a
Policies, I
better,
think it'd be
the rest will allow them to
If we could just
test.
do it on a, like a
I think that's what it ends up doing.
On a what?
for everything, like the entire, all the policies on the agenda in order.
Yeah, like I said, she could send them out.
You don't want to
I think I
penalize a
would
student
prefer
for
that,
trying to do
Because
it well.
she has to make copies of everything,
Coming out of ninth grade.
which I have,
Yeah.
which she then puts in this once they're reviewed. So she has to make copies of them anyway.
Okay, that would be helpful. Like, I know just starting 113 and working our way down through old business, through new business, we're gonna talk about it at that meeting, just have it in that file.
Or, and put them on the shared drives for that particular month.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion, just my thought process is what you guys said too, if we have to get the policies, just the policies, the supporting documentation, maybe put it in a separate folder somewhere else, because we're all trying to scroll down, like, the supporting documentation can be 15 pages, maybe weeks, and they're scrolling down until you get to the next
Yeah,
policy.
I'm not
I think
sure we
that's-
want that.
This is kind of slowing us up a little bit.
Yeah,
is
I like the way she's
all the
breaking
supporting
it out.
docs, does that make sense?
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and if we put the
I know what
supporting
you're saying.
docs in a separate folder, and just put the policies together as one, it'd be easy to find policy 204, policy 219, real quick for us.
Well,
rather
you know,
than-
that, there's an idea there too. You can split it up, you have like policy 204 could be a folder, and you have the policy, then you have the supporting documentation. Policy 205 could be a folder, and you can sort of like do on our website. Then when we talk
I
about
like it like
204, we
this.
just pull up the 204 folder, and there's everything we need. Because I'm looking here, like, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 PDF files, and they all start with new business. And then I have to scroll over some of the numbers are cut off. There has to be a better way to get this information out there. But have to
It's just the
challenge
naming.
finding it.
It's the naming, it's the nomenclature. She doesn't realize that they're being cut off. Like the first new business document says it's 200 to 213. If it says 200 to 213 first, read the full description of the title.
I feel like
If she just reverses the way she's naming the files, they're all 5 showing up as new business because of the concatenation. But if she named them according to the range, like the second new business document is 214 to 218. That's the information we need in the title. Is that what you're saying, Connor?
well, it is.
I think he's saying that each policy should have a link with the policy and the
That's
documentation.
what I would
But she
prefer
did
wording
that.
Like this, we have in the big folders. I either want like one file that I can just Control F and search what we're talking about, or I
That-
want on the drive,
but she
like a
did that.
folder. You can have a folder for the 100 policies. Then within the 100s, we can have policy 101, policy 102. When we talk about 101, we open it. We can even have old versions of the policy in there. We can have a history of these policies. That would be the easiest. So instead of 500-page documents, we have just click and point, and there's the policy we're talking about, and there's the support.
I will ask her what's possible.
And I'd love to help her with this. If she wants somebody, I'm not going to volunteer to do it. I'm tempted because I want this to be, I have a vision now, and I want to see that vision come to fruition. But
She would probably
But hold on.
gladly
I
accept
know.
your help.
Just explain to me what's wrong. Like, I'm looking at new business policies and legal, number 200 to 213, 32717.
So if you click on that link,
They're
what do you
all
get?
there. All the supporting documents are there for 200 to 213.
Right, I think what
But isn't that what
Connor's
you
saying
want?
is, I want a link
One
for 200.
for each?
I want
I'm
it to,
okay
yeah,
with
I want
that,
it,
too.
I want it to
not
be
a
clear.
range.
I don't want.
So that he clicks
It's
on
not
that.
clear because she's
Well,
not
and
naming them.
then Mr.
clearly.
Hurley's saying the same thing, like, then I don't have to try to scroll down.
Right, that's it.
Like, if we want to skip, hey, how about we skip that one and go to policy 218?
Yeah.
You don't have to scroll through 60
Yeah, I'm fine with
pages
that. Yeah.
to
Or
get to
even
it.
one file for each
If she doesn't want to do files,
Well, I have to talk to her because I don't know how much work that is.
right. And if she doesn't
Like
want to do
this
Yeah.
particular committee is
just a lot.
labor intensive.
Yeah.
But even if that doesn't work, then maybe a solution
very-
would be
she's
that she
very
could just indicate which
Eager,
pages.
so, yeah.
No, she's good. I mean, she's very on top of it. It's
Do
just
it,
that
yeah.
it's a lot for her.
Yep.
Like, just even if it doesn't work out and we want to keep doing these giant PDFs, then maybe if she just wants to indicate that policy 113 starts on page 8 out of 127. Policy 204 starts on page 50, so you just scroll right to it. Like, because that's my biggest thing. I don't want this working documentation when we're discussing the overall policy. I want the overall policy.
That's 127 pages.
This is some new business policies and legal 200.
All right, so I will
Yeah.
take that action to talk
That
to
would be
Kathy.
great. She probably
And I'd be
would
happy
mind.
to explore, if she wants to give me a call or if you want to offer to Connor has an idea that I'd be happy to.
I'll just let her know that Connor said he'd come in and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she'll say, "Give me his number."
You got other things for you to do.
All right. So 625 and 823 are finalized. They've been finalized by PASBA and are currently active. So Kathy was just putting those out there to let us know. Like one of the things I asked was that her to kind of keep us updated on all these policies.
I thought 625 was brought to us by the business office.
I mean, I think,
I'm sure why PASBA got involved with it, but whatever.
well, they just say, I think they look, if we have our own policy we want to add, we throw it to them and then they say,
Yeah.
okay, it's fine.
Yeah, okay,
right?
good.
So the last two items on old business were, we had tossed around, I think our own meeting, and then also in the full board meeting, there were two potentials for new policies. One was the grant disbursement. So we had talked about who has to approve, right? You know, does anyone just get to write a grant and submit it and then administer it themselves? And I think what we kind of went, we started with, we should govern the whole thing, and then we moved to, hey, there should at least just be some form of, approval process that everyone has to follow.
Some sort of accountability.
So that there's an owner, like just defining who's responsible for what. So essentially, what Jim and Lauren and the administrative team is. If you feel like what you're doing today is working and satisfactory, then let's just document it and say, hey, everyone, this is what you have to do if you're going to do a grant.
Yeah, we talked about bringing it before the cow just as an information item.
Right.
That's
So
how
can
I've always done it.
can we get something, I don't know if Lauren, like just a process that we can make as a policy?
First, most of the grants come through my office. I mean, they like about $450,000, $500,000 grants come through my office through federal funding and things like that. There are some, like the wellness grant, that's currently under Shell's as well. And sometimes we have these little mini grants which we direct to the principals. Hey, if there's like a teacher that's like mini grant, get something somewhere, just to have that come and ultimately come so that I see what they're doing and what they can put up on the agenda and calendar. A small grant, I think that will be coming to the board if she gets it, so that, for that type of stuff.
When a grant is closed down, is there like a simple mechanism for accounting for every dollar that was spent on that? So like a summary sheet that goes to the business office?
Well,
There's some sort of oversight on how the money is spent?
Federal, with the
Yes,
with the
I guess
heavy
I
duty
just-
grants, it's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
It's, and that's more.
I guess that's not the one I'm worried
That gets
about.
audited, that also gets audited by, we get audited by the federal government. Like how we spend those funds. So that's pretty cut and dry in regards
I
to.
think the one that's plaguing us all is what happened with the health and wellness grant. How there was that leftover money spent and somebody put, treadmills on.
Well, that's not what I'm most concerned about. I just think there needs to be, the point I brought up was if anybody can write a grant, then anybody could really tie the district to some type of, the terms of the grant without anybody else being involved. And I don't, like, if I were a teacher and I wanted to write a grant for a $1,000 classroom.
Like, does that teacher have to let anyone know?
Exactly. And I think
That's why we said we would bring any grant before it could be written, would have to go before the CAL.
Yeah, but then you said that, but then we also talked about that being a hindrance because sometimes time is of the essence and we're going to end up losing stuff because we have to get it
Was it just going
put
to be
in
an
front of the
FYI?
cow.
Well, people just have to learn to think a little further out, just like the field trips, honestly. We can't
Yeah, but
I need a grant tomorrow.
I don't feel like we need to approve someone writing a grant.
Well, no, it's not approving. And no, it's
think
not
that just-
approving. It's an information item. It's only a.
Yeah, but I mean, can't you let us know after the fact? Like, as long as we're being made aware, what's the difference if it's like?
Well,
I
we
don't
can
want-
list any grants received, but I think you're looking at prior to it as an information
How
item.
about this? How about instead of anybody can apply for a grant? You can go out and apply for a grant tomorrow, Jeff, but approval. Like we have to choose to accept a grant, not the board necessarily, or maybe the board does. But if we are offered a grant and we don't take it, then we're not beholden at all. So if a teacher wants to go out and write a grant on their own, I guess that wouldn't be a problem. But it's just
Well,
the
generally,
teacher doesn't have the authority to accept the grant.
but generally, when a grant is written, it's to be applied to a specific task or
Right.
program.
Sure.
So you had, like, I used to approve grants from the state of Ohio. There was always the activity, and was it financially feasible after that grant goes away?
But once you're offered the grant,
Right.
so once the state of Ohio says,
Somebody has to be considering those things.
once the state of Ohio says, here, we've accepted your grant application.
Then they put the program in place.
Well, don't we have to accept that? Like, it's not just, isn't there a contract that has to be signed? Isn't
Well,
there something?
a lot of times the program has already been approved depending on the grant
Yeah,
receipt.
but not I'm not talking about the program, I'm talking about the connection between, in that case, the district and the state of Ohio. Like, there's some type of official connection there, right? It's not just
Once
that
the
here's
grant
a check.
is awarded.
It's-
You approved the grant, you approved buying pens
Yeah.
dependent upon the grant's approval. So if you get the grant, you could go ahead with the
Okay,
program.
that's one way to do it, sure. I'm just saying, like, we could also do it like.
Because you don't want to say no once you get it. I mean,
Right.
you
There
awarded
needs
the
to be-
grant.
Well, I just want to make sure we're focused on what were the issues that started this whole conversation. Like, what are our
I
concerns?
thought it was the treadmills.
Well, it could be that could be your concern, and
My
then your concern could be
is
something
the-
else.
The legitimacy of the whole thing. Like, there needs to be some authority in charge of grants, whether that's the board, whether it's the superintendent, or whether it's a teacher, but it needs to be clear who that authority is.
You're,
That's in the grant. Generally,
But no, I'm
that's
talking about the district. Like, we have to have our own process for this stuff. Like, could a volunteer go and write a grant in the district without telling anybody?
not. Well, they have the boosters have written grants and received them.
And,
Don't
but-
forget, this
but-
is a grant disbursement
But
policy.
are those grants for the district, or are they for the
well, I mean, we
boosters?
can.
For us.
That's whatever we
We
want. It's what we
received-
want it to be. There is no such policy. We're just. There is no
You
such
sure there
policy.
isn't another one?
I think you started the conversation with how the money's allocated and who's accountable, and I think we learned that Lauren had an accounting, especially for the federal ones, and then everything went. All the money comes into Lauren, and all the money has to be distributed from Lauren, which I think we were okay with. And then we talked about we don't notify. We get told after the fact, and like, can't we be alerted that a grant is being sought after, and then
Well, and that's the
when
other
we get it,
But
can
then
we?
that's
It's
mayhem.
useful to know
That's
those.
mayhem, though, because we get turned down for so many. Is that, do we really
No, I
wanna-
think it's just
does
a
the
listing in
board
the
wanna
it's just
give-
it's just a notification that.
That's what I was saying. It's a listing and a notification that these grants are being applied for. And then as of whatever date those grants were received.
The reason I have my concerns.
What were we saying?
is
Oh,
because-
we can accept it for the grant, that's my opinion on that, because you're going to discourage
Yeah.
people from applying for grants, that's all.
Yeah, I'm not saying what the
Why
harm
is that?
is in having people willy-nilly trying to get them.
It's not
the
a
harm
problem.
is that there's
They
no
can't be
such-
accepted until.
Yeah, there's no such thing as free money. Like, there are strings tied to any dollar or any cent we get from any
Right.
organization.
And
And those
that's the
strings could
point.
affect the entire operation of the district. We need to know what those strings are. That's all I'm saying. And if the strings we determine are not, and I say we, I don't
Can you
necessarily
give me an example of when we've had that kind of issue?
Well, I don't know.
We don't know.
Like, I feel like we're presuming things can happen, but have they ever
I
happened?
mean, well, let's say there's a federal grant. Like, no, we did have an issue actually. We had the meeting at the PCIU. This was in 2013. There was an Obama government initiative. It was called, what was that? It was controversial at the from, do you remember what this was? It was something, Race to the Top. It was Race to the Top. And there was a lot of controversy about Race to the Top and some of the effects it would have on districts in terms of reporting we'd have to do and access to data. That was a big point of concern, point of contention. And some people thought, schools shouldn't be pursuing these Race to the Top grants. There was a huge national controversy. And we found out that the administration had put in for a Race to the Top grant. And we didn't know anything about this. There was a lot of controversy on the board, or questions on the board. Is this the same Race to the Top grant that has these requirements in place? And we report this information to the federal government, about our students. I think, Carol, you were concerned about a survey that was administered in conjunction with this. That was something different. There was some type of survey with this too. That was one instance. And we ultimately chose to
That
apply
was the
for the grant.
Pennsylvania Youth Survey study.
Well, I think this had something similar, but
But your point is well made, because I'm thinking of that Nexus grant too, that we
Well,
didn't
there was
find out
that.
until the end,
Yeah,
until it was
we're-
time to disperse it.
right.
And we should have been, we don't know what the strings were with that we might not have wanted.
So I think there are.
The strings, I don't know what the answer is. Can we
You
find
don't
out what
think
other
so?
districts are doing?
Generally,
We talked about last week that if we have published something in the agenda of something that's, Mr. Hurley going after all these grants, not necessarily, what do you maybe receive out of, say, if you put 25 grants you submit, how many do you think you receive?
We don't apply for that many, but
But I'm saying,
yeah, I mean, like.
Well, if
there-
you add them all up, like even the little,
Well,
small ones
Yeah.
that teachers apply for on their own, there's probably a decent number in a given year for the whole district.
Well, I have a question too. Well, I know the grants that I've applied for in my previous capacity ties up the administration with questions. Most grants would be a burden on our administration to produce the information. So are we just letting like sports boosters have access to our administration to complete these grants? Like they need to know attendance for the last few years, they need to know. So they're going to our business office maybe and getting information for their grant.
The answer to your question, most grants today do, Carol, your point's very well taken. Most grants today do require secure data, they need data
Yeah.
to apply for the grants, because you have to
Yeah.
show the need, you have to tie the needs with the organization's goals that are there. Now, most of the grant, like the types, when you talk about teacher grants, they would probably come more from foundations and things like that. The types of grants that we as a district usually get are the, for the bigger ones, they come from the state government and the federal government, and they have strict oversight through auditing, and so those, the teacher, you can sometimes they'll find stuff in foundations, that we applied for dollars to whatever we last year, we applied for that.
That's why I had technology.
Yeah, so once in a while,
Hours to
once in a while they
apply.
have little $2,000 grants out
Yeah.
there, people find, hey, we see this, we see that, and things like that.
Don't we have to, don't we have to acknowledge and accept the grant, vote to it? That's what we
what I was
did.
getting at
Or
earlier.
like the, when it comes to like the wellness grant, I know we approved that. I mean, there's some other grants that we acknowledge or we have to approve that we received.
Are you guys signing them as a treasurer and president or something? Are you signing these checks before we adopt,
Well, I don't
accept
know
them or
that-
something? We're just
I
saying
don't know
they
that when I go through each one of these, after
don't
we
know?
vote on something that,
You're even, it's just matter of facts.
I know for the one grant, I know I did sign. But I don't know every grant that comes through that I sign, can't say that I do. But, I mean, that should be where we question, when this something comes up on our agenda, naturally you're gonna ask a question, what is that? That relates to a board discussion. Mr. Hurley, correct me if I'm wrong, just because we apply for a grant doesn't necessarily mean we have to accept that grant.
That is correct.
So, I mean, the board ultimately has oversight, and
Have
with our
accepted.
discussion and, why, Mr. Hurley or Mr. Harris would explain why it's important.
So when they're awarded, we just should be notified, right?
And
So,
there's probably some
FYI,
that you don't go after just for the fact.
Well, but to your point, who needs to approve it?
Mr.
Aren't we saying that Mr. Hurley and Mr. Harris can do that?
Yeah,
Well, we-
they should be. We should just be FYI.
generally, a grant is for the purchase of something or supports an ongoing program, like the wellness grant, as we see, supports numerous things throughout the community. I mean, it's internal and it's, the Birdsboro Community Center and a lot of places use that from us. So, or if you look at the Safe Schools grant, that was equipment or program. We went with equipment and got it for about $25,000.
We're buying, we bought walkie-talkies with it. So it all varies. It could be an iPad grant or
And we accepted the walkie-talkies as far as a line item on one of our agendas.
right.
Things that you purchased. with
Right. That was already approved to purchase. We just supplemented that cost through a grant. So
Right.
that was already, so we saved money on that by
The
going
question
for
about
the
the
grant.
mechanics of the grants that you all are applying for, whether it's a state grant or whether it's another type of grant. When I was in California, I wrote a grant for California state agencies, money from there, and in it we had to include an attachment that specified the authority that the people at the agency I was working at had to apply for the grant. We had to cite at the airport authority in the code, like, we have the authority to apply for this grant because it was granted by the authority board on this date. When you apply for federal grants, are you just signing it off as Rob Burley, assistant superintendent, or do you have to say, I have the authority to do this by virtue of?
He has the authority. He
There's
has
a document
he-
signed every year.
Right. We have the authority, and he sends it to me now because he doesn't have it anymore in my position. So I have the authority by the state,
And
by
we
the
get that
code.
document every
to
year
go
that
in and
says
do
you're
it.
allowed to
So
sign.
do we
Correct.
need to create a policy, or are we comfortable with Mr. Harris running the mechanics of it and then notifying us when a grant is, we are given
I
to
think
us?
when you hire administration, for us, we should be questioning Mr. Harris and Mr. Hurley. But as far as what they go for in the justification, that's something they can bring to us later. I think they should have full reins to go out, see what's available, apply for it, and before we accept it, that's really when, then we get
Yeah.
involved. But I don't think we should get into the minutia of
That was my, that's my personal feeling, but again, I want to just make sure that, if people have concerns, fine, but do we need to have a policy,
I don't think we need a
or are we comfortable with, like, I feel like as long as we're made aware of everything, like Lauren, there's checks and balances. All the money goes to Lauren, so like Lauren's ultimately distributing the money for whatever the grant yields. So he's making sure that, that's being handled properly. I don't think we have any concerns about him doing that. Then there's an audit for the federal grant. So if we're not spending the money appropriately, we're going to be, it's going to be found out. Like we're going to know. As long as we're told, whatever those grants are we comfortable with just understanding what they are and what they're for? And I think Mr. Harris said he can list them in our minutes or in our agendas as informational. These are the grants that were.
So I think we talked about grant origination, but I don't think we ever addressed this grant disbursement policy that was brought up by Mr. Martino that he wanted us to discuss in policy that addressed the purchase of specifically the treadmills upstairs, and that there was no oversight in that decision.
I don't.
That's the genesis of this discussion.
I get it,
Just bringing it back to where
Well,
I'm with
honestly,
you, but
that's lack of judgment.
Are we really going to create a policy because someone?
That's the discussion we're supposed to be having.
Like, I appreciate Mr. Martino's perspective,
It seems like there
but
should
that
be
seems
some
like
oversight on these purchases.
because we got a
besides
treadmill 5 years ago, we're going to have to
we
create
don't
a
know how
policy.
prevalent the problem is. That's one we know of.
Well,
That's why we're going to be
They're
notified
sitting
whenever we get a
upstairs,
grant.
and no, we're not talking about grant origination. We're talking about grant disbursement.
That is what grant disbursement.
That's not grant
Well,
disbursement.
well,
Grant disbursement
Lauren
is
is
how
the one
the money
who's-
is spent once the grant is in-house.
Exactly.
That's what we've been trying to talk about.
But that,
Do we want oversight in that by the business?
I don't.
owners? And that's
Then we're going to
the
have
policy.
oversight in paying electric bills and distributing. Why are we only just worried about distribution of grant money?
Should be able.
If we're worried about that, then we should be worried about distributing all the
Because
dollars out of the
business
account.
office has all that oversight, but they don't have it on the grants.
What they do? They
I think
all the money has to go through him.
They do. It's lack of judgment. When you have a grant, say it's Race to the Top, okay, and I'm familiar with it. Race to the Top allowed for professional development. It allowed for numerous things. It also allowed for the purchase of dinner. Okay, so if people wanted to have PD and they wanted to bring food in, you could go get a cold cut platter, or you can go to the Four Seasons and spend a substantial sum of money on food, or you could take a trip. We could take a trip to Harrisburg or Honolulu. Okay, so it's judgment. And I've known a lot of districts that say, you know what, I can't go to Honolulu because in my district I would be crucified.
What does our district say?
We're not going to
Are you involved in the judgment is all I want to know.
Yeah.
Of
So
all
I
the
would
grants,
never
disbursements.
buy a treadmill for upstairs for my personal use. It's lack of judgment. Although the grant says you can do that,
Yeah,
it's lack of
technically
you can
yeah.
do that.
And it
It's
benefited
just-
2 people or
Right.
whatever.
It's lack of judgment, and I'm giving the treadmill to the athletic department. So I don't want to do it.
No.
Rob can run on it. If he
Yeah.
wants.
I've never run on that thing.
Yeah,
But, so the
but it's
mechanism
lack
is in
of
place
judgment.
that
But
you have oversight over.
and the business
person
office
that's-
has that. At the business office, like right now,
Okay, then I'm fine with
we
that.
have a PO in the business office, not for a grant, but for the purchase of services rendered. It has a certain amount of time allocated on that, and it's being questioned.
Okay.
Where it should have taken 2 hours, it says 8 hours. We're like, wait a
I guess that
minute,
just
that's not an
happened
all-day
when the
job.
leadership was-
So it's internal auditing,
Good.
our practice of spending money.
And you feel the checks and balances are in
Yes,
place for that,
yes.
but that would never happen again.
No, we're not.
I'm great with
no,
that
we
then.
don't do that.
Yeah, the district was not always managed as well as it is now, so.
But you have to also take into place, if I'm gone and someone goes, you know what, Honolulu is a great place to have PD, you'll come across this again where I'm like, we shouldn't do
Yeah.
that. So that's an honest conversation. But grant disbursement is done through the business office where someone's looking at it, and as long as we're aligned in our thinking, that's frivolous, that isn't frivolous. Or, for example, there's a STEM grant where you can go to a science fair or to a baseball game to look at the physics of a baseball flying in the air.
Right.
It's so.
Yeah, I think I agree, with you. I don't think we need a policy.
So for
I
now-
think it was just the way the district.
For
was
now,
run.
we're not going to pursue a policy. Mr. Harris is going to make sure that we're aware of all grants that are presented to us, right? He and Mr. Hurley and whoever else is in that capacity will, they'll oversee the acceptance of the grants. And then,
And we'll be notified.
we're comfortable with Lauren overseeing the spending. And, we'll do spot checks in Jim's office, make sure he doesn't have any artwork or anything crazy.
Gotta hide that Van Gogh.
Yeah. All right. The other policy that was in question or potentially in question was the student fees, the sports extracurricular. So I think and the iPad, the one-to-one. So specifically, I think it was how as it pertained to kids with free and reduced lunch. We don't have that currently written in.
You guys, here's what we'd like some guidance from you guys on this. With free and reduced, currently the practice based upon when it was originated was that free and reduced lunch students get a discount on their activity fees that come in. The question, that's not in policy or administrative guidelines. Would you like to have that, we either should get that in policy or administrative guidelines, one or the other, just so that we have something in writing.
The issue here, as it relates to the activity fee, I don't think it's an issue because I think in the resolution we adopt approving the activity fee. It says that you're on free or if you receive free or reduced lunch, then you pay a discounted rate. The issue as I see it though is if we take this framework that if a student is on free or the student receives free or reduced lunch, then there are other things that kick in as well. So it's not just the activity fee, but we were talking about it in the context of iPads and the insurance. And I think that was where it's kind of like mission creep. I think that's a term in the military. You have to be sure of your objective and you have to stick to it. Otherwise, you get distracted in other areas. And I think the same thing is kind of happening here. We decided that would be the guise under which we offer discounts for the activity fees, and now it's becoming the standard across the board. The question is whether we want that to be the standard and how, the scope is. So I don't know if we need a policy or what we need. I think we have to.
Well, I mean, I think also the thing is, if it feels like we're moving towards the one-to-one, like what's going to be our policy on the iPads or device, whatever it is.
Because it's written into that.
Yeah, like with
Initiative.
regards to the insurance, right? Like what's the responsibility or the
No
liability?
discounts should be extended that aren't specifically specified in another policy, like something like that.
Well, there just needs to be a policy. I think saying at this point. I
No, I think he's saying the same thing that you said, that when we instituted the extracurricular fee, it was written in there
Right.
what the condition would be. He's saying when they bring in one-to-one, it'll be codified in that document what the discount should be.
We'll probably need to call that out. Well, not only the discount, but just policy in general on, there's the fees, and then I think, in addition to that, we're gonna have policies on how we're gonna leverage, like how the kids are gonna, what they're responsible for, right? Like, I don't know, accessories, software, I don't know, whatever that's probably gonna have to be a recommendation from administration.
And
How
I
we wanna
wonder,
run that.
that's an interesting idea. I wonder, has like this is a new frontier really for a lot of school districts, and we're not at the forefront of this, but I'm sure there have been issues in other districts that might need technology, one-to-one policies out there.
So Rob, what's the policy number for the fees?
There isn't a policy for fees. It's in the resolution, as Connor said when he passed it. There isn't an actual policy.
It's in the
We
resolution.
talk about for the economically disadvantaged students with extracurricular. It's, as Connor said, it's probably in the resolution that granted the authority to give a reduced rate for economically disadvantaged, but it's not in policy.
I mean,
That's
I don't
one
know,
of the
like,
reasons why we brought it up.
do we need to have a policy for that?
So where are the other places?
Discussing.
It only came up in the context, I think, of the iPad issue. The expectation would be that if a student received free or reduced lunch.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing, just to read it back, is that there's no policy, but we have,
But there's an authority.
there's been
I don't think we need a policy.
it's not officially in policy, but there was a process that was put in place when the whole fee was
Yeah,
instituted.
and that's up to the board to change it. I mean, it was approved in the legitimate, in the way it should have
But
been.
where is that current?
It's 122 under extracurricular activities. So if you read down through, it says the board shall maintain the program of extracurricular activities at no cost to participating students, except that the board's responsibility for provisions of supplies shall carry the same exception as listed in the board's policy for regular school supplies. And it goes down about students may assume all or part of the cost of travel or attendance or extracurricular activity or events or trips. And it goes on from there. So, as far as iPad, something like that, I mean, that's whole new ground.
It would be helpful, I think, to see that resolution that was adopted instituting the activity fee. That would be buried in the minutes of that
I wonder
meeting.
if we should have all the resolutions posted on the website.
I mean, they do have this.
So how's a
Buried in
resolution
the
different from a
minutes.
policy?
So a policy is a standing system of this is how we're going to do things. A resolution is a one-time.
But isn't the fee thing
It's not really.
I mean, I guess how's that different than?
Perpetuity until it's
Yeah, so
amended.
resolution is
So
good
how does
until
new
it's
board members
repealed.
even know about it? It's
And
not
that's an
policy.
issue too, like when. Like,
How does
let's
the
say-
public even know? Like how would?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Because
what are
they're buried in
what are other
minutes.
examples of resolutions
That's a
we've
good
adopted?
point. I think they should all be posted.
There should probably be if
Well, under the policies and guidelines, we have guidelines. Where are they listed? Because I didn't see them on the website.
We got them there.
Are they? I mean, what are they under? I look.
Yeah, they used to be under policies, the
Yeah.
policies and then the guidelines. They
I didn't
used to
see
be
'em.
guidelines, but now it's just the policies, the guidelines as well.
Well, the
I'd like-
guidelines are right with 122. It's good policy and then guideline. I don't think there are always guidelines.
Not every
there
policy.
used to be separate
So,
categories.
yeah,
But it used to be separate, now
The
they're-
end of the policy in
The
that
board
section to find
docs.
the guideline now.
I thought the guidelines are a whole separate like document. Like we had guidelines for.
A lot of policies.
Because I looked for, I texted Mike on where, am I missing something? Like, why can't I find it? And
Okay.
I couldn't find, and I was trying to find the public display.
The system that we had before of having every public, like,
Under this.
I don't know if you-
Under the board.
I don't know if you saw the old way policies were on the website. It used to be that you had 100 as a category, then you had policy 101, policy 101 administrative guidelines. And they were all distinct.
I'm
Now there are these big
leaning towards
files.
Title IX, but I'm probably
And
wrong.
that was a decision that the committee had made that thought it would be easier for people because you could just go through and read them all at one time. But you don't have the administrative guidelines in there now. And the guidelines, but let me go back to answer, no, they're on board
They're right
docs.
here, yeah. They're all coming in with the board docs.
So-
That's it, the policy and the guideline.
Okay, so when board docs,
Policy
then
and
But I mean, on the website,
on the
I
website,
can't go
they're
see it.
not there on the website.
They are. I
But-
came to it through the website.
So they have to go to board docs.
Well, they'll automatically pass you to board docs if it's been reviewed by and approved. See, these are your board doc ones, they're hot links.
Yeah.
As we complete this conversion, the policies are, look at 222, for example.
Well, I go to school board and I go
Let's go
to
down.
policies and guidelines. I don't see any guidelines. I see policies.
Because it's in the policy.
Yeah, click on.
Well, but how would you know which policies have a guideline?
The ones that have them show up. There's a bunch of them.
Well, it shows
Goes
up.
right to it.
It shows the guideline within the policy.
What do you want the guideline for? And how do
Well,
you
like we have
want
a
the
guideline for class size.
You gotta go to the policy. to which
Okay, I went to the
guideline
policy and it says
applies.
you can't have more than 10. You have to have at least
Some
10 kids in a
policies don't
class.
have guidelines. The guidelines are for the administration to implement the policy.
Yes.
Yeah, but we have a guideline we've made it publicly known that we have a guideline for
policy.
class size.
It's the policy.
The policy says.
Policy spoke for itself.
No,
You don't need it.
well, read it. Read it to me then. Because it
No, we
says,
don't
I'll
have
tell you what it
policy.
says. It says you have to have at least 10 kids in a class. That's what the policy is for class size. And there's nowhere find on there in the website where it says that our guidelines for elementary grades are. It's not publicly out there that I could
I
find.
think you're
Joe, I'm
mixing
looking, I can't
terms.
find the guidelines in here either. Like here,
I mean,
104.
I might be missing terms, but we've quoted that, we've referenced those guidelines in public a dozen times, and they're nowhere to be found that I could see.
The only place you find them is on the head count,
You guys are
report.
talking about guidelines.
student population,
These
student
are-
He's
population.
talking about the class size
No,
guidelines.
these are two distinct conversations.
Yeah.
These guidelines are.
There's the guidelines within the policy,
Right,
but we have a separate
yes.
a separate book of
Administrative
guidelines that we refer to quite a bit, and I don't know where are they.
They are, this is something different.
That's what I was talking
than what's
about.
on Here, the administrative guidelines.
I'm sorry, Carol, I didn't mean the guidelines within the policy. I meant we have a separate, like,
Yes.
we said, these are guidelines we want to implement, but we don't want to put them in policy.
And those are not.
Class size being one of them.
Those are different, like those, the administrative guidelines, those are the big documents that sometimes are longer than the policies. Not the guidelines specifying within, like they're not, but those should be made available.
That's just one example. That's the glaring one because it's the hot topic. But I'm saying there's others that we have other guidelines that are
Yeah.
not
Could
policies.
we reach out to PASPA to see what they have for iPads and other schools? What kind of
So you're
policy
saying
they
these are
have?
not the same guidelines?
Yeah, and there's also,
That'll-
there's other, there's like Salisbury, there's some schools that are very progressive where I know the superintendent, I can reach out and they can give us.
That would be the idea.
There's like.
That's a good idea. We don't need to reinvent.
Well, I just,
Yeah, there's other schools that have had it for years now. and
but we have a resolution, which is great if you were on the board 8 years ago. But if you're not, which
There should be.
next year we won't have,
The
we'll have all these
resolution
people.
should be published, like, you'd have to know, really, yeah.
Resolution shouldn't-
I mean, really going back, a resolution could have been agreed to in the 1960s, it's still
Yeah.
binding.
That's what I mean. It's really policy,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it is policy. I mean, we've administered it
It
for
has the
years.
same forms of policy, but, yeah. So I mean, if we wanted to repeal, if we wanted to get rid of the activity fee, on the whole, we could either repeal the resolution that authorized it, or we could introduce a new resolution saying that we're not gonna have it. But
It's more flexible, I guess, than policies, because policies
It
have to go
is.
through one reading, two reading, and then.
That's
So
true.
you do a resolution because you want to be a little bit more dynamic and be able to.
But not only that, we
Next
also
board
had
can
like,
reverse it.
we've passed resolutions, like one was to recognize law enforcement, like that's a resolution. That had more of the effect of a proclamation, and it didn't have any, meat behind it, but it was a
I mean,
resolution. And those things
I
should
guess
be,
it's semantics, but it does feel more like a policy than,
it has the same effect as policy.
Like-
Yeah.
Like this resolution.
the administration has to,
The
they have
guidelines-
to administer it, right?
The
They have
guidelines
to.
are on our intranet. If you go to our intranet, you'll see it. So I could have Scott set you up with that because I had a
Well,
question
but are
when I
they
first
not
got here.
public?
Still out there.
Are they not public?
I don't think so.
I'd be curious to see what's
I don't think so.
already.
I mean, I couldn't find them. That's why I was.
No, I had Scott send you. It's a different way of going. It's not on our website.
And then we're gonna have to go in and visit those policies, first, scrub them a little bit, so we only have one defining policy.
Yeah,
The guidelines.
The guidelines are not going
on
to
the
sync
iPad.
up now for the policy. That's the whole separate document. The numbers that you want, everything's going to be.
Well, I think the guidelines were things that were, at least my understanding of what they were was they were basically meant to be not policy. Like we didn't want to make it officially a policy to say, here's what our class size is.
The way it was
This
taught
is what
to
we would
me-
like to govern to.
The way it was taught to me when I joined the board is that the policy is like the 10,000-foot view, and the administrative guidelines are the way that that view is implemented. So
Right.
that's the minutia. The minutia is in the administrative guidelines, and the policy is the principle.
He's right. That's what it is.
So if you're, so a lot of the information that people are really interested though, that's in the administrative guidelines.
But the company, it says, here's the recommendation. The guidelines used for class size, so we can say, okay, right from the resolution, and say, here's the recommendation. They're not policy, just a
So Rob, you're going to reach out to a peer
Yeah, I will reach out to
and see what we can find out.
Yeah, in regards to like iPad, what they can do to reduce those types of things. I'll reach out.
And are we, as far as the fees go, I mean, I don't know who proposes. I thought it was also Mr. Martino who brought it up
About the what?
about the fees.
I think it was just in the context of, since we're doing it for activity fees, doesn't necessarily mean we should do it for iPads. I think that
Or
was,
maybe it came out of the extracurricular committee, but there was a discussion around free and reduced lunch, and it's like what the fees are for. And what Connor was saying is that there was a resolution some time ago that said, here's how it would be administered. But
well,
I mean,
so when the board approved the activity fee, what was that, 2010, 2009?
And before Mike.
Just before you and I were.
Sent it out to the,
10 or 11.
10 or 11. So when they approved that, there was a resolution that they adopted. And in that resolution, my theory is that it said, the student who receives free or reduced lunch
Correct.
pays 50% on the dollar, or whatever it is, 50 cents on the dollar. And that's where it is. So it isn't a policy, but it's
I wonder
a...
if it should have made a policy.
Well, it should be public. It should be accessible.
I'm just curious, like how the administration knows to
They took the
execute
answer,
on it.
The answer is they can't, because we don't have a central repository of resolutions agreed to by the board.
Like who collects the fees and who's collecting it from the free and reduced lunch kids? And is it consistent? Like if it's not policy, how do they know how to
Well, the
administer it?
athletic office would collect the fees.
But does
They're supposed to collect the fees.
Mr. Schmidt knows-
That was sort
Well,
of,
yeah, that got tightened down pretty heavily. They had to provide a report with all the people and
right,
to make sure that they were being
That was
charged.
very loose. in the years past.
but I mean they have a list of who's in what category, what they should be charged.
And how many activities you're in, this.
Right. It's like a
150,
table.
150,
Wait till you're
75.
someplace of sport.
Oh, I'm sure.
You will be notified.
And that's very confidential information, you know that, right? The kids are on, that has to be
Yeah, that
very
was-
tightly kept
That was only
within the
from,
administration.
when it was Deuce doing it.
They can't share that with coaches or
Well,
anything.
Mr.
All right, so we don't need we're comfortable not. We'll look into the iPad thing,
Right.
but we're not going to touch
I
the
think it should
fees
come with
for
the
now.
resolution.
But something we need to do, I think, on the website is on the school board tab, have a separate page for resolutions. And whenever the board adopts a resolution, whether it's
But
a-
where are they? I mean, who would be able to tell you?
Well, we
what
don't,
ones are-
I think we just need to start moving forward. We want to go back in time and find all the old
Do you
resolutions.
think it's in the legal section?
No, it's in the minutes of the, like, if the
Of all-
board adopted,
yeah.
for example,
In the
remember when we
minutes.
approved the resolution or honoring members of law enforcement last year or 2 years ago?
All resolutions should be
Let me
posted.
finish here. That would be in the minutes of that meeting. But there are resolutions, like the resolution to close this as a school. That's in the minutes as well. The resolution is to do the activity. That's buried in the minutes of that meeting when it happened.
It's in the agenda, so what I do is if I need to find something, I
You have
say,
to
well,
go
when
back
was
in
it?
time.
I go
Yeah.
back to that agenda and
It's
that's
been
it.
buried from the public, that's what he's saying.
It's inconvenient to find. So I think that if there is something that has some type of binding effect on the district, then it should, if it's like a policy, it should be easy to find. And just have resolution adopted June 15th, 2016 or 2017 and a link to it. And then resolution number 2.
That would be,
adopted state.
Scott, tell me, is that more like board docs? Does board docs do that? I'm familiar with, yeah. So that's investing in technology where you could go in and search a term, board docs, and it would go find it, and you could find the resolution.
I'm going to find an example of a school district that does what I'm sure there's one out there, and I'll
Yeah.
just send out a link to that.
Yeah, if we're using something online like board docs, it becomes a searchable live database of
May
material.
I make a suggestion too? contacted, and I think a solicitor should be contacted. I'm guessing that when a resolution is passed by the board, maybe the solicitor should determine how and what, should make a recommendation, what policy it is impacted. Like that,
Well,
that maybe, that resolution,
I think
isn't that,
that's
but don't you
overkill.
think we should ask the solicitor? That maybe it should have went in that extracurricular policy. The part, not the whole resolution, I'm saying the part of the resolution,
Well, no, because that
because
was.
that's how you govern, is through your policies.
But also through our resolutions. We govern through our board action. And a resolution is a board action, it's the same as a policy.
Are they binding?
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to ask the lawyer what they think? No? Do you think, Mr. Harris, that do you think that when a resolution is passed, that our solicitor should be pulling out parts that, and make recommendations for change to policy based on a resolution?
Generally, before a resolution is passed, we address policy. We wouldn't address a resolution
So if there was-
in violation of our policy.
So, but if it affects changing the policy, would the recommendation come for us to change the policy? I'm just wondering if that resolution should have changed the policy.
Generally, we look at
Yes.
policy first. We look at the policy before we look at
Before you.
changing something. You know, we say, hey, that's a violation of our policy. Oh, and then that
But if it's something
discussion.
the policy didn't speak to, like fees, it's not in our extracurricular
But
policy,
we wouldn't
so we
add
passed
them.
a resolution to collect fees.
Then that would be a
Should a part of
guideline.
that have impacted then the policy?
Then that would be a guideline.
Here we go. I'm going to send out a link. Exeter does what I'm suggesting we do. They have a webpage that says below is the list of resolutions passed by the Exeter Township School District School Board. And then they list resolutions celebrating the life and honoring the memory of Don Thomas is the first one. And then they have a bunch of others. Urging the General Assembly to establish a funding formula for basic education. All of these different things. And
It's a
it's
great
all
idea.
just there. And then it won't be an issue in the future. So a member of the public can go on and say, hey, listen, well, we're in December 2017, you approved the policy doing X. Why aren't you doing X? And then the board would have to either follow that resolution or they'd have to repeal it. So,
All right, so going forward, we'll do that. Are we any concern about not having any public view on the guidelines?
yeah, I'm concerned about that. They should be made available.
See, that one time they were.
I thought they were, but I don't, like I said, they
The
weren't there.
administrative guidelines were always listed underneath the policies. And then they went in order of 0 to 900 also.
Scott, is that something we can put back on?
Yeah, the reason they were removed that probably about a year and a half ago was just because the forms that were embedded in them were often in conflict with the actual form being used. They weren't in mesh. So we were having individuals who were getting confused with some of the guidelines that a form embedded in
When you
them.
say a form,
So I'll use, I think, maybe fundraising was one of them, that the guideline fundraising form has since been updated because it's from.
can we just remove those kind of links from the guidelines? Just have the guidelines as they're stated?
Yeah, well, the form was a part of the guideline at some point, so that's why they were removed, just because we didn't have everything in sync. Now, we could, I know there is a guideline book that was run through, and scanning, we'll just get everything out there in its current format, but that was the issue that we were running into, just some discrepancies.
The forms, but I mean, if we take the forms out
Yes, yeah, then you move it,
and just keep it as what's stated in the guidelines.
yeah,
What do we need to do to do that?
a standard, but nothing special.
Okay.
Yeah, like a matter of running it through, getting it here.
All right.
I do have a request for it from the line. Can we get a copy of the activity fee resolution at some point? Because I want to know what the parameters are for that specifically. So whatever set of minutes that resolution is buried in, if somebody from the administration can find it and send it out. And maybe that can be the first one we get listed on the website, the new resolution section.
All right, so we're going to move on to new business. Policy 200 is the enrollment of students. So pretty much everything that PASBA put in here was basically an update to state law. Pretty much the entire policy that we had was replaced with this new one. I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at it. It's pretty high level and cut and dry. but it added in some of the specific situations regarding like homeless, defining like where a student, how a student is eligible for your district, things of that nature.
Well, what is this here? The district shall administer a home language survey to all students enrolled in the district school.
We're required to by law for it when they apply for admission.
Okay. Wow. Also, do we have a large homeless population?
I'd say right now, probably 20 kids qualify as homeless. Now, when you think of homeless, what you're probably thinking is living under a bridge. I'll give you an example. Most of our cases are like evictions, things of that nature, and they're doubled up living with grandma. And so that's considered homeless under the government.
So it's not without shelter.
It's not necessarily with that. We do have some challenging situations like all districts, right? But nonetheless, it's not necessarily. The most common is an eviction, and they're living with someone else, and then we have some obligations in terms of transportation, food, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Any concerns on this one?
Yep.
All right. Policy 208, withdrawal from school. So this one, there's very little change to our current policy.
Well, looking at this line, district resources and staff shall be utilized to assist the student in pursuing career goals. That seems a little bit extreme, I don't know. Look at a student withdrew from school 20 years ago, come back and say, hey, your policy says that your staff is supposed to help me pursue my career goals. Get to work.
You're no longer a student.
Well, yeah, but once they
Get over 21.
Yeah. You're no longer a student.
okay.
Alumni.
So stationally, I mean, that's referring to like guidance and,
Okay, so it's only until they leave the district then. Because the way I interpret this on first reading it is that a student who is withdrawing, they can use those district resources to help with their career search. So as long as that is just like, I mean, I guess if they wouldn't be bound by these policies if they're no longer enrolled in the district. This is only up until the point that they formally withdraw.
If you're no longer enrolled, you're no longer a student.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm fine with it.
Mr. Potts, what say you?
I'm good.
Mrs. Bites? You're good? All right, 209. Health examination screenings.
There's a couple things with that. First, in that policy, we do our physical exams in grade 6 and grade 10. I think it says 11 on there. We did receive permission probably about 10 years ago from the state to do it in grade 10. It has to do with driver's licenses, so the kids, when they're getting a driver's license, they have to get a physical, so it go easier in the families. That was done. That's about, that permission's about 10 years old, but we did receive permission from the BDO on that, so we want to change that to grade 10.
Okay.
We're probably going to need to update that permission at some point in time, but I would change that to grade 10. Also, we no longer do TB testing, and I think that's in that policy there, that they have. And we are not required to do so under state.
So the TB test, we can cross that out?
Yes, cross that out.
Now, regarding that exemption that we have to the testing for the physical or whatever it is at a different age, could that, in those 10 years that have intervened, could there be a change in state law that would preempt whatever exemption we may have?
It's a possibility, and I'll reach out to the Department of Health and see what they say. I think we're on good grounds on that because that's pretty standard that way. But I will check, quick check.
Yeah.
The other big add to that from PASBA was essentially saying if a student's health appears to be in question, that we're to notify the parents, and that they should let us know what they're doing about it. So essentially, if, I guess it's like, I don't know if it's illness or whether it be obesity or whatever,
What is depression? Is there like
it didn't really say.
What page is that?
It's the first page. It's under the main paragraph in guidelines. It's about 5 paragraphs in.
This is the growth or development when it appears to a school health official that a student deviates from normal growth.
Yeah, and it also talks about requiring health or dental care. So, like, I guess if someone had like a bad skin condition or something that was obvious, and it looked like nothing was being done, or that we're to notify the parent, and they need to.
Well, it says here, I'm wondering, the parent or guardian shall be required to report to the school the action taken subsequent to such notification. But if I were a parent and the school told me your kid has to have their teeth checked out, but that isn't impacting anybody else. I mean, what if the parent were to say, okay, well, thanks for your feedback. What happens after that we're requiring a report? Okay. So I make sure keep reading. So if the parents don't do it, then we have to. Okay. What if the parent doesn't get back to us? So we say the parent, we say you gotta have Johnny checked out for this issue, and the parents don't say we don't think that's any of your business. Then do we have an obligation to arrange a special medical examination?
I think what this says is our obligation is to notify the parent.
But if the parent or guardian fails to report the action taken, so that would indicate that if they don't get back to us, then the school nurse shall arrange, we must do it. That last sentence. And it's cited there, so I'm guessing there's something in the law that says that we have to do that. 294.
I don't know, this one has like 400 pages of supporting documentation. I'll follow up with Mr. Subers on whether or not we need to.
And if
Include
does
that.
it need to, like, and it's the law, we have to do it, but I just want to make sure that, I don't have a problem doing it either philosophically or anything. It's probably the right thing to do. But I just want to make sure that that we know what our obligations are.
All right. Yeah, they're the 2, 9, and 4 are just references to specific school codes, so. All right. Yeah, I'm going to suggest that
Oh, you got the call?
we have a motion to adjourn. Second? Scott Potts. Thank you.